My life now is substantially different from what it was a couple of years ago. I went from being out of shape, procrastinating, and scrolling all the time, feeling I'd never be able to accomplish anything, to be honest, to building my physique, being disciplined, and taking better care of my health. And to speak the truth, this hasn't been an overnight process, okay? It takes time, I'm not gonna lie to you. It took me years of progress and years of self-improvement, but through reading dozens and dozens of books about this subject, I've been able to compress the time that it took me. And that's why today I want to do the same for you. I wanted to give you a list 5 books that most profoundly changed the way I see the world and helped me reinvent my life and lifestyle for the better. So the first book on our list is going to be about the brain, dopamine, and neuroscience. It's called Dopamine Nation. And the reason why it's the first book, it's because it will help you understand how dopamine works and how to fix your dopamine levels. It was written by an Lemke, and it's worth pretty much all the videos that you can find on the internet about dopamine and dopamine detox. And the book will give you a complete understanding of how addiction forms and works and how it's related to dopamine and how it even affects the lives of regular people. And the first step to reinventing yourself, the first step to changing your life is to stop chasing things that don't matter and start focusing on what actually does. Because getting rid of the things that are ruining your life at the moment, it has to be the first step. Because it's the only way there is to make enough space for you to truly change. And I thought that I understood how dopamine worked before reading this book, right? But it proved me wrong. It helped me grasp the complexity of dopamine and the relationship that it has with pain and pleasure, okay? Because there's a balance there, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. It will help you understand why you're chasing those things that don't matter to you. Things like junk food, social media, alcohol, or it can even be toxic relationships. It would equip you with the tools necessary in order to understand what's happening in your brain and how to solve those problems, how to get rid of those things. Dopamine Nation taught me that pain and pleasure come from the same place. They're very close in terms of brain areas and their functions, and it's key that you understand this in order to be able to regulate your dopamine levels. So it goes like this. Pain is experienced as a feeling of depletion. It's a feeling of want, of desire, of need, and usually accompanied by a craving that pushes you towards what you desire. Now, pleasure is sought when pain arises, and pain will be triggered when too much pleasure is experienced. So it works as a balance, and there can't be one without the other. Okay, they work together hand in hand. That's the addiction mechanism. That's the reason why addicts are miserable, because in seeking pleasure all the time, all they bring to their lives is pain. And the most common example is not, you don't have to be a heroin addict to understand that. The most common example that I see amongst my client is food. I have clients who crave chocolate so intensely that they struggle to work, they struggle to focus whenever this chocolate thought enters their mind. And so they experience pain, they experience a lack. But when they end up satisfying their desire and indulge in eating more chocolate, they feel worse than they felt before, because the pleasure wasn't at all as intense as they thought it would be. And the sense of guilt that accompanied that is even worse than that. Now, dopamine is tricky because it's much more about the quest than it is about the destination. And when you experience dopamine release, it feels good, but it only does so that you move closer to a thing that you're supposed to get, the object of desire. And dopamine is all about drive and motivation. It wants to get you to act, and that's why you feel pleasure. You feel pleasure on your way to this thing, whatever it is. And that's the biggest issue, because once you achieve the goal, dopamine fades away, as its only job was to make you want the thing and take action to get it. Now, another important point to understand is that dopamine is a battery. You have a limited amount of it that can be released before it needs to recharge itself and cannot deliver anymore. And so that's what happens at the end of the day. You feel like you don't have any more motivation to do anything. You feel drained. You feel like you can't even move your arm to, I don't know, get that remote going. But the sad truth is that most people are so scared of boredom and pain that they fill their lives with dopaminergic distractions, preventing them from ever feeling satisfied their lives because it drains them of all of their dopamine. And remember, when you're depleted of dopamine, the balance is going to even out to the other side, which is going to be pain. So you're going to experience pain because dopamine is at its lowest. And you have to push on pain a little bit to get that dopamine back, that and a good night's sleep. And so that's why while reading this book, I began to look at my life with a different angle. I started to see all the behaviors that I was engaging in that were depleting me of my dopamine and keeping me locking kind of this perpetual state of shallowness, a feeling of lack and need. And I realized that if I wanted to profoundly change my actions, if I wanted to stop being a slave to my dopamine and my cravings, I had to start controlling my motivation the way I wanted. And for that to happen, I had to go through a phase of feeling worse before I feel better, through a phase of whatever they call it, a dopamine detox. But dopamine detox is not the only thing, okay? Dopamine detox is one component, but you have to understand how dopamine works in order to do it correctly. So that's why I invite you to read the book. And the reality is that as long as you're not in control of your dopamine, it will control you and lead you to a life full of excess, poor judgment, and decisions that you will regret. And I think that this phase is inevitable if you want your life to improve, especially if you're 15, 17, 20, 25, 30. And that's why this book is top of your list and why you should read it, because it will give you the knowledge and the strength that's necessary to stop wasting your dopamine on things that don't matter and start getting things that do. The next book is called Grit, and it's written by Angela Duckworth. It explains the fundamental difference between people who achieve great things and those who unfortunately don't. And one of the most important ideas there is, especially in the beginning of the book, is the lesser importance of talent and how effort prevails over it. This means that if you weren't a child prodigy at 4 playing Mozart on the piano, it's okay. You can still become great. You can still engage in those things and eventually become successful, because the path is to find something that interests you enough so that you pour your energy, time, and motivation into it, which may result as developing a passion in it, okay? And the equation looks something like interest plus effort times time equals potential passion. Now, I have to be careful because passion is not this perfect thing that's waiting for you out there. Passion is not this perfect job that you'll just get if you get this internship or get this diploma. At least I don't think, in the way you're conceptualizing it right now, passion is not perfect. Okay, it's a bumpy road. Passion is just a construct, and it's way more important to set a clear trajectory based on your life's mission than it is to aim at some grandiose goal because it sounds impressive and because there's a lot of money attached to it. And before reading this book, I thought that I had to find my passion, whatever that meant. And that the reason I wasn't fulfilled was that I hadn't found it yet. And I felt bad because I felt like something was fundamentally wrong on some level with me because I didn't have any passion. But halfway through the book, I realized something crucial. I could kind of choose what my passion would be. I just had to take something I was genuinely interested in, give it a shot, and see if I could develop a passion in it. Because again, passion is not one perfect thing that's waiting for you. You have several passions that you can build throughout your life. And of course, there are conditions for this to work. You have to commit to doing this thing long enough and follow through on your promise. That's pretty much the most important thing. You have to keep engaging even if you haven't developed passion in it yet. Okay? You have to give it a try. And it felt liberating because this idea that you have the power within yourself to build your passion through crafting, through experimenting, gives you a sense of control that you simply don't have when you think that passion is a perfect fit. And more than that, I think that when you look at highly successful people, they might seem like superhumans, okay? Like Elon Musk, always working 16 hours per day, always perfecting their craft every hour of the day, always doing like brilliant stuff that just pops out of their minds. But if you read this book, if you read Grit, you quickly understand that it's not that inaccessible, okay? There's nothing superhuman about the actions that lead to success and passion. And it's about the quality and consistency of small but repeated key behaviors that you stack up over time. Now, the main issue is probably your timeline. You probably have a biased idea of how long it will take you to form a passion, because thanks to the internet, we all want to have everything right away now. But the process taking years is probably the only real way there is to achieve it. First, you have to go through this trial and error process. You have to invest in a year trying something, find that it doesn't work for you, and move on to the next thing. And that's what people are most afraid of. That's what I was most afraid of, because it means that you're wasting your time, which is really bad in a society that pushes you to use your time to make as much money as possible. And so when you don't get the results right away, you throw it to the garbage because you think that there's no passion in this thing. But the real problem is that you haven't even given it enough time for it to potentially grow into a passion. And that's why you need to be mentally resilient. You need to be gritty and find comfort in the idea that you're building skills that will help you along the way, even if it means that right now you don't make any money off of it, and that people are laughing at you because you're doing this thing in your own personal time. Something that I quickly understood when I read this book, and that was actually life-changing, is that you don't have to rush. In fact, you shouldn't rush. I think Angela Duckworth, I'm probably going to make a mistake here, but I think she started being a psychologist when she was in her 30s. And before that, she was a teacher. And so she tried those different types of careers and just realized that it was for her, but she wanted more. And she built those skills over time that led her to eventually become this really successful psychologist. And this book is an excellent way to start cultivating the right mindset and avoid wasting your time trying to find your passion on the internet. Now, third book is more than a book. I think it's a philosophy and a way to think about work and its place in your life. So it's Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. And the thesis is basically that working slower, working more consistently, working in a deliberate manner will lead you to achieve better results in the long run than adopting the hustle and workaholic culture. Because most people are not productive. Instead, most people rely on what's called pseudo-productivity, which is a form of busyness with a poor return on investment. And it's essential that they act appearing busy and just doing all these things, typing on keyboard, answering emails and whatnot. But at the end of the day, they never use their brains to full capacity to produce meaningful work, to produce real output. And this book, along with another one on the same topic pretty much about work and the place that it has in our lives, which is called Do Nothing. Those two books, they have completely rewired my brain when it comes to work and its role in my life. Because the culture in North America often promotes nonstop working, promotes just becoming hyper successful by working 80 hours per day as quickly as possible, preferably in your 20s, and are earning as much money as possible so that you can buy yachts, which you're not even going to use because it's going to be blocked by a bridge. But many people don't realize that this mindset can lead to wasting a significant portion of their lives doing the wrong thing, chasing the wrong thing, degrading their health faster than expected, and that's bad. And you'd probably be better off working in a way that aligns more closely with your goals, aspirations, and vision. And hustle culture may not be the right thing for your life. It may not be the right fit for you, and that's okay. I found out that it wasn't the right way to live my life, and I'm way better off without kind of this obsession about success and productivity in my life. At one point, I even felt bad because I was working like probably 30 to 40 hours per week and earning not enough money to buy myself a yacht. But then I realized that I did not want to work 80 hours per day doing sales, like selling stuff to get the commissions, to get more money, to then build my team, to then whatever. I did not want to spend my life stuck in traffic and endure toxic work environment where I have someone looking at me every day, basically telling me everything that I should do and that can fire me every moment. Now, one thing for certain that I realized though is that the stress of modern life, the pressure that this culture is putting on yourself, is not compatible with good health. Instead, if you just take a look at the statistics, I don't think it's a surprise that obesity, anxiety disorders, and depression state have never been higher. Because I'm convinced that our current notions of what work is and what it should be in your life have a tremendous and negative impact on our health. And Cal Newport doesn't talk about this explicitly in his book, but I think it's an underlying theme that I should address. And I'm a big fan of the second rule of the book, which is to work at a natural pace. That is a pace that aligns with prioritizing your health, which is, to me, the most important thing that you can do, especially when you're young. And I find it fascinating, to be honest, that people are willing to sacrifice their health and shorten their lives by working more and just enduring greater stress just for money and social recognition. I think you'd be better off by working less, but working on things that really matter to you. I think you'd be better off working at a pace that allows you to take care of the other areas that you have of your life, unless you want work to be the only thing that's present in your mind and body and overall life. And I think that in doing this, you'd move away from external pressure and start focusing instead on your craft, which is the most important thing. Because ultimately, if you want to become successful, the only real thing that matters is that you have skills that you can offer to some people in exchange for money. And I think that right now you should focus on developing interests that might evolve into passion over time, all of that while building skills that are valuable to society at large. And remember, modern productivity can become a trap, and I don't think that you should consume any more productivity content. At least I'm not anymore, because I've realized that it robs me of my time and attention in a relentless pursuit of more optimization, more tasks, more money. Whereas adopting a slower, more human approach will enable you to achieve great things in the long run without sacrificing your health and sanity in the process. Now, the next book is a little different from the other one on the list because with the three first books, I was focusing more on self-help guides based on facts, so nonfiction. But this one is more of an autobiography of a neurosurgeon diagnosed with cancer. You probably have heard of this book. It's called When Breath Becomes Air. And in this book, Paul shares his journey and how it shaped his understanding of life, death, and time. And I added this book personally because it changed profoundly the way I appreciate life. Because by default, and unless you go through relatively traumatic experiences, it's really hard to fully put your life into perspective and understand that you're going to stop existing at some point. Unless you're involved in a car accident, which I hope you won't be or never had to, then it's really hard to grasp the concept that you're a finite being and that at some point you're going to die. And through reading this book, it feels like you're entering the mind of someone actively going through this process. And as he describes it to you, you vicariously start to understand those concepts, become more conscious of it, and identify with the narrator so that you can have those insights for yourself. This process, this journey through this book will guide you to understand what's most important to you in your life. Because as you read, you'll naturally begin to reflect on your own life to define what a life well lived would mean to you. Because the author, Paul Kalanithi, dedicated a significant part of his life to becoming a neurosurgeon. In fact, I think it was more than 10 years, which most likely contributed to his early diagnosis of such an aggressive cancer. Because the impossible hours, the years of sleep debt, and the constant stress of the profession, they likely accelerated his aging, deteriorating his health at twice the normal rate. And in this book, there is a profound quest for meaning that override everything else. Social pressure, money, social recognition, success. That's why I believe anyone seeking self-improvement should read it. Because it takes you out of what you think is most important in your life and puts you directly in front of death and the lack of time. Because we all know that life is finite. We all know that eventually we're going to die someday and that we cannot buy our time back. Yet this knowledge doesn't allow us from wasting so much of our life on things that don't matter. Things like social media, gossip, or shallow work. And the fear of dying often leads us to avoid truly living, because instead we find refuge in addictive behaviors that steal our awareness of time passing, which goes back to the first book. And while other animals, all the species on Earth, they live in the present moment, humans are the only species that sacrifice sleep, health, and time with loved ones for TV shows and Kardashian drama. Last book on our list is about spirituality. And I'm not really big into spirituality. I'm not quite there yet. And I was, to be honest, hesitant to put this book in the list because I don't think I've quite understood the book in its entirety. But still, I think that The Power of Now holds a lot of keys to happiness, stillness, and ultimately enlightenment. The premise of the book is that you're stuck in your own reality. You're identifying with the shallow projection of your life. And that's preventing you from living in the present moment, which is the only true way to live happily, steadily, and with content. It's like you're there physically, but spiritually, your soul is trapped in the busyness of the modern world. And that's all you're experiencing. This is why life is painful, uneasy, and can even feel empty. And I really enjoy this idea that time doesn't really matter because, first of all, it's not time that matters. There's no absolute value of time. It's your human perception of it that matters. And the second is because the only time that matters is the present moment, as you cannot live in the past and you cannot live in the future. And yet every day in our minds, we trap ourselves by jumping from sad thoughts about the past to anxious thoughts about the future. And in doing so, what we do is that we fail to focus on the only thing that truly matters, which is living in the present moment. But the problem is that most people will live their lives without ever understanding what's happening in it and why they behave a certain way or why they feel a certain way, because they'll keep dodging the present, fearing that it's too painful, living in constant states of fear of the future and sadness about the past. And the main focus on the book is not to change your entire life, but it's to kind of introduce you to this awareness of the present moment and to make you understand that there's a better way. But in order to start on that journey, you have to be willing to live in the present and change your way of thinking, but truly change it to a point that your brain is different at the end of the book. Because you're realizing that you can't live this life anymore just projecting yourself past and future. And whether you're someone that's spiritual or not, you cannot dismiss the fact that you're probably living most of your life on autopilot mode. You're using your phone while you're watching a movie, you're calling a friend while you're driving, you're listening to Netflix shows when you're alone. You fill your mind with these distractions, scared of might happen if you don't. But in doing so, you deny yourself of experiencing the only thing that matters, which is the present moment. And if you don't understand that fundamental concept, you may even die before you start living. So anyway, that was my list. And those 5 books, honestly, truly affected and changed the way I see the world and how I live my life on a daily basis. So let me know what you think about this. And as always, I hope this helps. Trust the process.